this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is part 2 of this kitchen session. Deliberately split into 2 because there are those that like getting the stuff out of the pots and trimming roots and talking about that bit, and others that like this discussion. Now this discussion really is looking at the plant, what it is, and because of what it is, we then decide what sort of media it might want, and also what sort of pot and what size of pot it might want. So there are some decision making processes going on. You're not just going to chuck them all in a pot, it's not as easy as that. Right, stuff. I've got some cocoa husk in to soak. That's all sorts, big bits, little bits. It's just straight out the bag. Well, washed and cleaned first, obviously. I've got some charcoal, just opened a new bag, dirty stuff. I've got some Burnham's bark, which is smaller stuff, smaller grade stuff. I will get the medium grade soon. This is a mix that I mixed up for something else and didn't use all of it. And this is a mix of Burnham's bark, small pieces of cocoa husk and some charcoal, and there's some grit in there as well. So that was made up for something else and hasn't been used yet. There's nothing wrong with it. Then here there's a mix of cocoa husk and large bark that was used for a plant, and the plant didn't grow in it. There's nothing wrong with the plant, it just didn't like being in there. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's not old mix, that's new, so that'll get reused. The giant bark is in here, fresh, and over here is some more cocoa husk should I need it. The plants are up the end. I've got some wire, some raffia, wire cutters, pliers, and my poking holes screwdriver, because I may want to wire a plant into a plastic pot and there's no holes to put the wire through, so we might need to make some. And I've got I've got my cinnamon, because we made some cuts when we got these out of the pots. They never got sealed. They didn't get sealed at the time because I hadn't actually sprayed the plants with the hydrogen peroxide and rinsed them off yet, so it would have been a bit daft putting the cinnamon on before I'd done that. So the cinnamon can go on today before they get potted, if I remember, that is. Assortment of pots, we've got some of these are good, these are going to be difficult to get again. Wide and flat with massive holes, excellent drainage, not bad, difficult to get again. Some of these I got a while back, which are opaque, which is handy because they don't need to sit inside a black pot to keep the algae off, but they only have that size. And then I've got assorted right down to tiny little ones. We won't be using any of them today. Next size up, and then some bigger ones. So we've got an assortment of pots. So we've got some decisions to make. Right, and also we've got a coffee. It's AM, only just, mind, but it's AM at the moment. I'm not usually messing about with plants in the kitchen AM, but I didn't actually have any watering to do today. Right, this has had its canes I wanted taken off already taken off, leaving me a plant with no new growths and no sign of new roots yet. This is very swollen, the base of this one, so we will get a new growth there, I suspect, and we will probably get one here as well. So potential for some new growths, and it's a nobly type, Prima Donna, and nobly types have a predictable growth pattern. They will produce their new growths either during blooming or not long after. Those that bloom late winter, early spring. I mean, there are some noblies bloom at some daft times, but those that behave themselves and bloom at the normal time will produce spring growths. With those growths will come a new set of roots, and that will be a vigorous set of roots. Yeah, so virtually a replacement for what you've already got if what you've already got isn't very good. So if you go to repot one of these and the roots aren't too good, providing you're going to get some new growths, it'll be fine. And they can live with virtually no roots for some time off of the stored energy in the canes, but the canes will desiccate if they have to go on for too long like that. So got some older canes on here. The two latest growths from last year are the ones with the blooms on. They're nice, healthy, plump canes, which is good because the roots aren't brilliant. So they like to be nice and tight in the pot. They don't need a massive pot. If you think about it, the base of the plant is only that big. It's not a big plant. It might be tall and leggy and it might be top heavy, but it's not a big plant as far as the pot is concerned. So it doesn't need to go in a big pot. That's the decision on the pot size, not too big. The other thing is if the pot's too big and the roots don't fill it, it'll stay wet in the winter. That's not going to do your plant any good at all. It's supposed to be dry in winter. Right, so I reckon I can get that in one of those quite nicely. We'll have a look. Always check. Yeah, that will go in there. The roots at the bottom will curl round, and then in that pot I've got enough room for 4 or 5 new canes before it gets to the side of the pot. That's 2 years worth of growth in that size pot. Yeah? So that's the size pot it's going in. Now what does it need? Decisions for a nobile on media. Do you want a media that retains moisture? It needs to be dry in the winter. So the simple answer to that is no. It doesn't need to retain moisture. However, in the growing season they are drinkers and feeders. They've got to get those full-size canes going. So it needs to be able to hold some moisture. So it needs a halfway house. Yeah? So it needs some chunks in the bottom. I'll use up some of this. As I say, it got put to one side. I'll just leave those bits out. I only want bark in the bottom. I don't want the cocoa husk. This is just for drainage, nothing more. Just using up some of this. Just a layer to cover up the holes and make sure the bottom of the pot doesn't retain too much moisture. Yeah? Then if the roots don't get right down into the bottom of the pot before winter comes on, I'm not going to get a soggy bottom in the pot. Right, so the actual mix, I'm going to go to some of this. So there will be a bit of cocoa, so that's quite large pieces there. I'll take out some of the cocoa husks, I don't want too much of that. So that's more than enough large pieces for a pot that size. The rest of it is going to be small bark in the main. So that's got some chunky bits in, small bark, so there's air gaps. But the smaller bark will retain moisture a little bit longer if it gets given any. And then hopefully I can shake some charcoal in without making too much mess. Charcoal should help keep it sweet longer. Still yet to be proven in my arena, simply because I haven't been using the charcoal long enough. And then in amongst that, I'm just going to dunk a little bit of the wet cocoa husk. Just so that it has got a little bit of retention in there. You have to bear in mind this will get watered so infrequently in the winter that the water will go straight through the pot and the cocoa husk will have a hell of a job to hang on to it. It'll be gone out the bottom before it can get a grip. So it's not a big deal. Some more stuff in. Right, now whether this is going to stand up on its own or not, I don't know yet. Now these roots are quite long, and if I push hard on them they will bend and break, but if you twist them they don't. Now it's just a matter of filling up the gaps. What I'm doing here is the pot's a little bit low in the plant. The plant's a little bit low in the pot. Engage brain. But what I'm doing is making sure I get all my media down in there. A few little air gaps is not the end of the world for a nobile, but it would be better if there weren't any. As I said, these do produce quite extensive root systems once they start. But if you pot a little bit low, you can always gently lift the plant up, yeah? And then you've got room to get a bit more media in. Now I know it sounds all crunchy and, oh, you're squashing all the roots. Can you see any roots there? No. The roots are on the inside of the media because I've just put the media down the outside of the roots. The roots are in towards the middle of the pot. However, there are some here, so I won't push quite so hard. But if this is going to stand up on its own, it's going to need to be quite firm. Right. Nobly type sitting on top of the media. The base of the plant sitting on the top of the media, not in it, on it. So you should be able to see the place where the roots come out at the base of the canes should actually be visible. Now if I let go of this, it's all going to flop. So I'm actually going to tie it. But do I need a cane? Do I need a cane? I think I do. See, I'd like it like that. I'd like it nice and, you know, upright. That's my plan. At the moment it's not very firm. So we will need to get some either a cane or possibly even two, one down each side. Always the downside of trying to pot up a tall plant that hasn't got a good root system. Right, it's managing to hold itself at the moment. Now I might be able to do this with the little canes because these are unobtrusive. And the plan is, this is a big heavy one, so if I can get a stake down the side of that one, pointy end first, Roger, and up against it, I might not even have to tie it. We'll just lean against it like that. No, I think it might need tying. Look at the other side of those blooms and inside there. How about that? Yeah, that's got it. But we've still got this lot all hanging out here. And this one, and its weight is with the blooms here. Yeah, that's what's doing it. So I think what I'll do is I will put a bit of raffia around. We'll just get it to tie on nicely. Right, we'll start with the cane because the cane is actually quite firm, so that'll be our start point. Leave an end when you tie onto a cane. You're going to come back to that, aren't you? Well, leave enough to be able to tie a knot with. Don't leave a little tiny short stubby bit. Otherwise you have nothing to tie on with. Right, now if I go around the outside of that cane that we've got held, then we're going to pull that one in and go round. This is only loose, it's only just holding these upright, it's not to, and these aren't going to swell up, it's not like these are growing canes. This is just merely to hold things in place and make the plant look nice and bushy and upright. So we need that one pulled a bit tighter, like that. Then the next one pulled a little bit tighter, leaving me the last one to go round like that. And this one I will go round the cane. So I want this one nice and firm. There we go. And then we come back round here and try and find the loose floppy end that we want to tie to, which is where I left it. And this last little bit, this last little tug is the bit that will pull that cane in. So there we go, the cane hardly shows, the raffia hardly shows, and the plant now won't wobble about anywhere near as much when I pick it up to water it. And hopefully we will get new growths and new roots soon. I haven't done any tags yet. I'm not exactly going to forget what that one is, am I? So that'll go over there. That will get an absolute soak. Two reasons. This and this, the charcoal and the Burnham's bark, is dusty. And it's dry. Right, what's going to come out the lucky dip next? Another Dendrobium. Michael McCarthy said this one, which was Kao Green, is highly likely to be a Phalaenopsis type, and it does have that look about it from where the previous spikes have come out. One straight out of the apex, one a bit lower, and one in the next leaf joint. That's exactly where they would come from. And the previous cane, one bloom straight out the top of the apex. So yes, beautiful stripes on the canes. Lovely reddy purple stripes on this. It actually makes the plant look quite attractive, and even the leaves have got a reddish purple edge to them. So it's an attractive looking plant, whether it blooms or not. However, it has a zero root system. Not sure what that is. It might be a growth. But what it does have is a new growth with root stumps that are now going to grow. So I will have a lot of roots very soon. It's going to push on nicely, this one. Right, been grown on from a seedling. So again, we're going to end up with a tiny pot and a very tall leggy plant. But unlike the previous one, this one doesn't try and flop out. It's an upright plant. All I need to do is stake that and that'll be fine. So pot for that one. It would probably go with the same size as we've just used. That should do. Bit of chunky stuff in the bottom. Well, typical, isn't it? Where can that go? You can go in there. So I virtually all of that came out then was some cocoa husk rather than the large chunky bark, which is what I wanted. I'm just hand picking them. It's only just to get a covering in there. Right, so that's that. Now, mixture, I would say for that. Now that, if it is a Phalaenopsis type, which is highly likely, if I could keep it warm enough, would not need a dry winter rest. It would need to be a little bit drier in winter, but if it had the temperatures, and preferably some day length as well, that would be a continuous grower. So I've got to allow for my lower temperatures, so it will have to be quite a bit drier in winter than it would like. Yeah, so it's going to have to be forced into slowing right down almost to a stop, because if I don't do that and I carry on watering and it's not growing, the roots will rot. Trust me. And that is from actual experience, much to my annoyance. I lost several Phalaenopsis types by treating them as continuous growers, the same as I've done for my Latoria types, and not appreciating the fact that they just slow right down to a standstill in the winter time and therefore don't use the moisture. The roots rot. So yeah, it's a compromise if you can't keep them warm enough. So you need to be able to hold a bit of moisture for their growing season, but come the winter time you need them to dry much quicker and have some good air around the roots so that they can have a drier period in the winter, not because they need it, not because they even want it, but because they're going to get it because of my lower temperatures and shorter days. If I didn't allow for that, then it gets dodgy. You can quite easily lose your roots. As I said, from experience. Oh, sorry, I thought that was somebody else's cat in the garden. It's mine. I didn't recognise him. Well, he had his disguise on. He's got his Macintosh and his dark shades. He's pretending to be a detective in the garden there. He's actually been out there. He's gone round, all under the bushes, all under the hedge, and all under the staging where the bonsai are. He's actually checked out the whole garden. Now that implies that another cat has been in there, or possibly a fox. But something's been in his garden, so he's been round and checked all the boundaries and sorted out what's what. Probably making sure there's nothing still there. And if there was, he would run straight indoors, I expect, because he's a wuss. So that one is. It's funny, the fluffy one with the cute little face, he's the killer. He's the one to watch. Right, there's not much more I can do to that. It's not going to stand up, that's for sure. And I've got my new roots about to come out at the base of this growth here. So they'll go straight down into media now. That mustn't be buried, that's got to be sitting on the top. Now I doubt if one of these small canes will actually hold that up, but it's got to be worth a go. A lot of it will be depending on... You're going to stay there like that? I do believe you are. Yeah, jolly good. So that was an easy one, wasn't it? And I'll just go around there. I suppose I ought to go around the stake as well. Otherwise it'll only wobble, slide down and all that sort of stuff. I'll hold it. Wobbling all over the place here. Yeah, it's going to have to, just going to come out again and go back in. Get that a bit steadier. Still not good. Perhaps we try a second one. Perhaps I push a second one in there. Try two. One don't work, try a second one. So say, as soon as those roots get going, it'll hold itself up. And then it'll be fine. So it hasn't got to wait too long. Those roots will start getting down into the media, you know, 3 weeks, possibly 4, and they'll start binding on. Right, again, massive soak. I'm not happy with that, you know. Oh well, I'll just have to handle it carefully until the roots get going. Good soaking for that one too. Right. Right, I know what a lot of people are waiting for. They're waiting to watch me mess about with these Brassias. Right, now on this one we did have some pretty hefty cuts, so we will actually have a go with the cinnamon. So these were quite large cuts here, so put the cinnamon on. I think there's just one on there. Oh no, there's 2 there. Another one there. And that cinnamon effectively has a sterilising effect, which is unusual. It's a spice at the end of the day. It's supposed to go in your apple pie, but it does have a sterilising effect and a drying effect. So it dries up the end of the cut, which stops any microbes and spores and moulds and things getting a hold. God, I love that smell. Right, they're going in a wide flat pot, already predetermined. Large chunky bark in the bottom, so we don't block up those Tiny little, sorry, drainage holes, large drainage holes, not tiny little ones. Now Brassias, when they're in active growth, are drinkers, and I've made the mistake in the past of putting them in large chunky bark so that they've got lots of air around their roots, because they seem to like producing aerial roots. It's a contradiction in terms. If you've got aerial roots, you're going to have your work cut out trying to keep them hydrated. Yeah? However, if those roots are in the pot, they'll stay hydrated better. But if you've got large chunky bark, it's going to dry out too fast. They're strange roots on Brassias. A lot of roots, like if you think about your Vandas, you get them wet and they go green. You know they're hydrated. These won't. These stay white. And they'll stay like that for 6 months before they start showing green. So they need to be in moisture all the time to allow them to absorb it. So they're not going in large chunky bark. They're going in some of this, which is cocoa husk. It's actually got some grit in it. The grit is irrelevant because there isn't much. And I will put some chunky bark in so that there is some air in round. Actually, we can use this up this time round. Get some of that in there. So that's a mix of chunkier bits of cocoa husk and larger bits of bark. So they've got a mixture now, because they've got quite a bit of the small bark and some small bits of cocoa husk and some charcoal, which is quite small. Still not absolutely sure whether charcoal absorbs moisture or not. Irrelevant, there's plenty in there that can. So that's actually a much finer mix than I've ever used for a Brassia. Now let's see what happens and see if they grow. I want to see these roots really take off. That will prove the point. Now both of these are going in this pot. It's not open to debate. You are going in there, and they're going to have to go in sort of like that. And they're going to be tipped slightly so that the latest growths are sat on the top of the media. I'm not having any of this climbing up to the sky nonsense. So there we go. There's a tip gone now, straight away, look, little new tip. That's one gone. There's nothing I can do. I mean, that's how they are, and all I can do is gently get this media down in between them. It's just got to be gentle. I doubt if I've mixed up anywhere near enough here, so I'll have to stop and do a bit more. So that's sort of one side. Now we've got to come around the other side and down the middle. But we'll do down the outside first. Oh, I've got nowhere near enough mixed up here. Got so used to doing small pots recently, not even a close guess. Right, we'll do it again then. Make sure that I've got enough this time. Some of that, another load of that. And a bit more of that. So let's see. Right, where were we? Down in the middle. I don't want too much in the middle, because I want these to push in together. So I'd rather it went down the outside. But it's going to have to work its own way down there. If I try and force it to any extent, those new roots will just snap. You can see the tappings filling it in. Well, it's not leaving a lot, is it? And the new roots on this growth are now in the media. All of them. They're all in the media. However, on this side they're not. So we'll get going down here again. And down the middle. There's a hole in the middle basically. Right, and hopefully we haven't broken too many. that should now stay wet, which is just what it wants in the growing season. Somebody made a comment, am I happy that the pseudobulbs are getting smaller? They're not getting that much smaller. That's an old one. That one is a bit smaller, and you can't say anything about the latest growth because it hasn't got a pseudobulb yet. But yes, they have got slightly smaller each time. They've come from a nursery grown, you know, with those sort of conditions. And mine got disturbed because it got repotted. Right, there we go. Brassia, Santa Cruz, Santa Barbara, it was Santa Summit, not Santa Claus. And all those new roots are now underground and they can now stay wet, which is what I wanted to do. Right, how long have we been running on here? Somewhere on here it says 20, oh, I can never find that when I want it. 30 minutes. That's plenty long enough for a video, quite honestly. And the next two are effectively identical. So I'll talk them through and then we'll have the camera off. Now this is a black hair type, and like the Phalaenopsis type that we did earlier, if I could maintain my temperatures through the winter with some better day lengths, this would continue to grow. Yeah, they are by definition warmer growers. They don't really have a cooler winter to any great extent. They have a drier period. Sometimes that's only 5 or 6 weeks, and often it's not in what we would think as winter. I mean, I think of winter as December and January. They often get their dry period at the end of February and March. See, now I always think of that as spring, you know. Anyway, cinnamon. So I'll put the top back on, because this one again has got a couple of large gouges in the rhizome, so we will seal those off. One there, and another one in there. There's 2 big ones. Right, virtually non-existent root system, and at the moment no signs of new growths whatsoever. So this one's going to have to live off its resources, if it even survives. We shall see. But that will go in, again, it's a media that needs to hold some moisture for the growing season, which would be its wet season, but come my winter, when it's going to slow down and stop growing, I need something that's going to dry very fast and doesn't hold too much moisture. So that's the same discussion as we had for the Phalaenopsis type. Now the xdelicatum, different kettle of fish altogether. These are stonking growers when they get going, and these can grow into absolutely massive plants. You'll need a bucket. But that's in many years' time. At the moment I'm only managing to grow 1 growth a year, so this one's not pushing on very fast yet. But look at the difference between the previous growth and the latest growth. Look at the difference in its ability to hold nutrients and stored energy. So who knows, we might get 2. We might get 2 this time round. Possibly 1 off the older growth. But anyway, the logic on this one is that it's going to be a drinker while it's in active growth. These roots are viable. It's even got a couple of growing tips, yeah? So it's got a root system that's working, and it will grow a massive set of new roots when it pushes up its next growth, whenever that chooses to be. So that needs to be in something a bit more chunky, but nonetheless still needs to hold moisture, but it's going to need to be dry in the winter. And out of the ones we've looked at, this is the one that needs to be the driest and the coolest. Yeah, The parents from this, one of which is Kingianum, however you want to say it, is actually, you could call it a mountain grower. It grows in areas that gets hardly any rain towards the end of the winter, virtually none. I mean, I've always said there's no place where orchids grow that they have no rain, but that's not far off it. Those parts of Australia are incredibly dry, sort of midwinter on out towards spring, and it grows quite high up. It's cold, and because it's cold and dry, they're survivors. Now that's different to a lot of the others that we've talked about that are actually more tropical jungle type places where it doesn't get cold ever. So these are very cold tolerant, but not if they're soggy. So again, slightly chunkier mix this time round to allow it to be very dry in the winter, hardly any water at all, and hopefully it'll push out some new roots soon. So as I said, I won't do those two. I'll finish this, or this will just be too long. So that was a set of ones that oh, somebody's going to say, what happened to the little piece of Prima Donna? Well, somebody nabbed that almost as soon as that video was posted, so don't all clamour for it. It's already allocated, so it's already done. That's a long way off blooming, but it has a new growth and the roots aren't bad, so this will pick up nicely this year and grow a nice cane. Right, so I can go back in there for now. So that's it for this one then, and I always say updates will follow, but what I'm trying to do with my idea of the flashback types of videos is that I would like to return to whatever was done in a potting session, so that video could possibly be re-watched, yeah, and then the updates are done against that view. So these will stay as a little set, even though they've got nothing to do with each other, but they'll be a set because they were all in one video. And the next time we do a flashback update, which will be in 4 to 6 months, I would say, we'll come back and we'll look at them as a set. Yeah, they will stay as a set for those purposes only. And yeah, thanks for dropping by. I hope you like the idea of splitting these kitchen sessions. Some people will watch both parts. Some people are more interested in the chat about the media, the pot, and the long-term growth habits, which often determines the media and the pot. Some are only interested in getting them out of the pot and trimming the roots and that sort of thing. Some will watch both, but by separating them out you get to choose. Yeah. And I was told that sometimes people feel guilty skipping out of a video because the bit that's coming up doesn't interest them, and they almost feel guilty. Never feel guilty about leaving a video. It's your choice, it's your life. You stay because it's interesting to you and you want to see what comes next, or you don't. It's entirely up to you. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.